At 2:13 a.m., Ava Lee stood under the cracked plastic awning at the Fulton transfer stop and watched rain run off the shelter in thin silver ropes, soaking the cuffs of her jeans anyway. Her second bus was late by 9 minutes, then 11, and each minute felt expensive. The app on her phone had already told her what she owed this week: rent overdue by 6 days, utility warning in red, minimum payment due on the clinic debt that never seemed to shrink no matter how many night shifts she stacked. The battery icon sat at 12%, and under the warnings were 12 missed calls from Evan's school office. 12. At that hour, the number itself felt accusatory. When the bus finally hissed to the curb, she climbed in with her cleaning tote pressed against her chest, careful not to drip on the seat. The heater blasted stale air that smelled like wet wool and old coffee, and the windows were fogged by tired people heading to jobs no one saw. Ava wiped a circle clear with the side of her hand and watched the city blur by in fractured neon and black water. By the time she reached the river district, her socks were cold enough to numb her toes. Her stomach had started the dull, hollow ache she knew too well, and her shoulders burned from carrying supplies she was paid to bring, despite working in buildings where single light fixtures cost more than her monthly rent. She checked the school voicemail on silent for the third time. Mrs. Corcoran's voice stayed measured and polite, the way people sounded when they had repeated the same script all day. Fee deadline. Activity suspension. Please call us back to discuss options. The final message, time-stamped 6:42 p.m., had Evan in the background asking if she was still at work and whether he should tell Coach he might miss Saturday. Ava ended the playback before he could finish. She had promised him 2 weeks ago that she would handle it. She had promised in that same bright tone she used whenever the truth would only scare him. The tower where she worked nights rose from the wet street like a lit blade, all glass and polished stone, every line designed to look effortless. Her keycard opened the service entrance on the east side, away from the lobby where guests stepped out of black cars into dry warmth and piano music. Inside, white light bounced off steel counters and stone floors until even shadows looked expensive. She signed the overnight log with hands that still shook from cold, tucked her phone into her apron pocket, and rolled her cart toward the freight elevator. Bleach tablets, microfiber cloths, surface-safe polish. The plain inventory settled her pulse in a way sleep never did. If she worked the list, she could get through the shift. On the ride up, she did the math she had done every night for months. This contract paid $180 per deep clean visit if she finished before dawn, and if nothing was damaged, and if no one filed a complaint. Transit took 16. Evan's lunch account needed 40 by Friday. Rent took nearly all of what was left. If she accepted one more emergency call this weekend, she might cover the school fees before they locked him out of athletics. Might. The number was never stable. There was always another late fee, another charge marked processing, another form she had forgotten to submit because she was too tired to read straight after midnight. The elevator opened onto the 52nd floor into a corridor lined with dark wood and indirect amber light. Even quiet had status up there. No hallway chatter, no television leaking through doors, no clatter of plates from small kitchens like in her own building where walls were thin and everyone heard everyone else. Here, every sound arrived softened and curated. Distant bass from a private event downstairs, the whisper of climate control, the near-silent click of her cartwheels crossing from runner rug to marble. She kept her gaze lowered to her route sheet, because looking too long at the framed art or the sweeping windows always made something tight in her chest pull harder. She started in the West Guest Salon, where crystal pendants threw fractured light across a white grand piano no one touched. Fingerprints on glass tables, rain-spattered marks near the balcony doors, a spill ring on a lacquered sideboard that had to be lifted without streaking. Her body moved through the sequence on memory while her mind kept catching on practical alarms. Evan would wake at 6:30. He would check the fridge first and pretend not to notice if there was only yogurt and half a loaf of bread. He would leave for school before she got home. Hoodie zipped to his chin against the cold, shoulders trying to look older than 14. She had arranged so much of his life through notes on the counter and prepaid cards and apologies typed in the margins of permission slips. By 2:47 a.m., her hands had warmed enough to stop aching, but fatigue crept in behind her eyes like pressure. She leaned over a marble console and caught her reflection in the glossy surface. Damp hair escaped from a knot. Skin drained pale by overhead light. A bruised yellow half-moon near her elbow from carrying supply crates down her apartment stairs when the elevator broke again. She straightened and kept moving. She had learned the danger of pausing too long inside thoughts that had no solution. There were only tasks, then transit, then a few hours of sleep, then calls she kept postponing because each one felt like admitting she was failing someone. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Once, then twice, then again. Unknown number first, school office second, landlord third. She let them all go to voicemail and hated herself for the relief that followed. If she answered, she would have to choose which payment to delay, which promise to break, which person to disappoint in a way she could not soften. A knot formed at the base of her throat anyway, hot and tight, and she swallowed against it while spraying down a stretch of spotless counter that did not need her panic mixed into it. At 3:05 a.m., she wheeled the cart into the main gallery and paused just long enough to flex her cramped fingers. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, rain swept sideways across the city in hard silver lines, turning red taillights into smeared ribbons below. She could see 3 neighborhoods from that height, including the patch of low buildings where her apartment sat with its peeling paint and broken intercom. A place where winter draft came in through outlets and the laundry room lights flickered out every other day. In this penthouse, the stone held warmth from hidden radiant heat, and the air smelled faintly of cedar and expensive soap. Wealth had insulation built into it. Poverty had weather. She moved on to the dining wing, resetting chairs with exact spacing and replacing water glasses that had not been touched. Precision was the one kind of control nobody could take from her. She aligned cutlery, corrected a napkin fold she had not made, and logged each completed area on the tablet mounted to her cart. The software time-stamped every task. If a supervisor asked, she could prove where she had been, minute by minute. The habit had started as professionalism. Now it felt like self-defense. Records mattered when your word carried less weight than a client complaint typed in 2 angry lines. A staff member from evening service crossed the corridor carrying stacked trays and nodded without stopping. Another passed with fresh linen and did the same. No one was rude. No one was warm. They were all workers orbiting a center they never touched, each trained to leave no trace of their own exhaustion behind. Ava understood that language better than most. Keep your head down. Complete your route. Do not draw attention. Do not ask why certain rooms stayed closed or why schedules changed with no notice. Invisible labor survived by being reliable, not curious. At 3:22 a.m., she stepped into the secondary kitchen to refill sanitizer and found herself staring at the tiny corkboard by the service phone, where handwritten reminders were pinned in neat blocks. Vendor delivery windows, floral rotation, security protocol updates. Beneath them, tucked almost out of sight, was a child's drawing in blue marker of a house with crooked windows and a sun too big for the page. Someone on this floor had taped it there deliberately. A quiet human thing inside all that polished control. Ava looked at it for 3 seconds, maybe 4, then turned away quickly because tenderness at that hour could break her open faster than threats ever had. She checked the time. If she kept pace, she could finish the East Corridor before 4 and catch the first express bus home. She pictured Evan leaving for school without seeing her and typed him a message anyway. Proud of you. I'll handle the fees tomorrow. Eat breakfast. The typing bubble never appeared. He was asleep or pretending to be. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and pressed both palms briefly to the cool edge of the sink until the tremor in her wrists settled. When she pushed her cart back into the corridor, the light above the private hall entrance glowed a muted gold against dark paneling, and the long stretch of marble ahead reflected her in broken segments with every step. She adjusted her gloves, lifted her chin, and kept working, because dawn was still hours away, and she could not afford to stop. The wheel of Ava's cart snagged for a second in the seam where runner met marble, then rolled free with a soft rubber squeak that sounded too loud in the corridor's curated quiet. She reached the private hall entrance and checked her route sheet again under the amber wall light. Not because she doubted the sequence, but because protocol in this building mattered more than effort, and effort was all she had. The line item read, East Corridor dusting, sconce polish, baseboards, then private lounge threshold only. No entry unless signed authorization. She angled the cart toward the first console table and started spraying cleaner in narrow, careful passes, shoulders tight from habit. Footsteps came up behind her with the crisp pace of someone who never had to carry heavy things for a living. "Ms. Lee?" a woman said, each syllable clipped smooth. Ava turned and straightened. The house manager stood 3 feet away in a charcoal suit that looked tailored to her posture, tablet tucked against one arm, silver badge pinned at her lapel. Nadine Roche never raised her voice. She didn't have to. 2 uniformed service staff paused farther down the hall, not staring exactly, but close enough to hear. "Yes, ma'am," Ava said. "I'm on East Detail." Nadine's gaze dropped to Ava's gloves, then to the cart position, then to the bright line of wet polish she had already laid down near the carved double doors at the end of the hall. "You are on East Detail," she said. "You are not on private corridor clearance." Ava followed her line of sight and felt heat rise under her damp collar. The rope stanchion that usually marked the boundary had been moved against the wall, probably by evening staff. Without it, the corridor looked continuous, just another segment of marble and dark wood in a place built to erase seams. "I stayed at threshold," Ava said carefully. "No entry." Nadine gave a brief smile that carried no warmth. "Threshold is not yours to define. In this residence, if a boundary marker is absent, you confirm before proceeding. You do not assume." The 2 staff members lowered their eyes in practiced unison. Ava heard one of them shift weight, tray balancing with a faint glass click, and humiliation slid through her in a slow, familiar burn. It was not the correction itself. She could take correction. It was the public shaping of it, the small ceremony of hierarchy where her mistake became a lesson for everyone else. "Understood," she said. Nadine took 1 step closer and lowered her tone half a notch, which somehow made it sharper. "You are highly recommended for discretion. I'd prefer not to revisit this. Stay to your map. Keep your eyes on assigned surfaces. If there is uncertainty, you call me first. Do you understand me?" Ava kept her face neutral, though her jaw had started to ache. "Yes, ma'am." Nadine tapped her tablet, logging something with her thumb. "Good. We have guests on lower levels. Service noise is to remain minimal through 4:30. Complete and report out through Pantry Station C." She looked once more at the wet marble near the private doors. "Re-clean this section, then step back." By 3:29 a.m., after Nadine moved on and the 2 staff disappeared around the bend, Ava was crouched with a dry cloth, buffing out work she had already done once, each circular motion precise enough to count as discipline. The marbles smelled faintly mineral under the citrus cleaner. Her knees throbbed through thin denim, and water trapped in her shoes had gone cold again. She focused on the mechanics: pressure, lift, fold cloth, repeat. Because if she let herself think about the school calls and rent notices, and now a documented correction on her overnight log, panic would scatter her hands. A nearby service door swung open, and a young server stepped out with a stack of folded napkins, then paused. "You okay?" he asked quietly, eyes on the cloth moving in Ava's hand. She nodded without looking up. "Fine." He lingered a beat, then offered a small, sympathetic shrug that said he understood more than he could say. "Roach did rounds on everyone tonight." "Lucky us," Ava murmured, then pressed her mouth flat, worried she'd said too much. He gave the smallest breath of a laugh, gone almost immediately. "You didn't hear it from me." He slipped away, soft shoes silent on the runner. Ava finished recleaning, stood, and scanned the corridor the way she had taught herself to scan unfamiliar rooms years ago. Exits, cameras, blind corners, people who looked too calm or too tense. The habit came from an old apartment where slammed doors and heavy footsteps had carried warnings she learned to decode late. Even now, in a penthouse where everything shone, her nervous system still tracked danger in fragments. Tone, timing, the gap between expected noise and actual sound. She rolled the cart backward to the approved line and reset her supplies: fresh cloths, new gloves. Inventory count matched. She logged the reclean on the tablet with a short note: boundary clarification received from management. The software stamped the minute. Documentation had become its own kind of shelter. When she reached Pantry Station C for sanitizer refill, the door to the service stair cracked open and a gust of colder air slid through, carrying damp wool and a trace of cigarette smoke from someone who had stepped outside against policy. The storm had strengthened. Rain hit the high windows in uneven bursts, then eased, then hammered again hard enough to sound like thrown gravel. Somewhere below, bass from the private event pulsed faintly through the building structure, a distant heartbeat under stone. She unscrewed the concentrate cap and froze as voices drifted from the corridor, too low to make out words. One voice was Nadine's, steady and official. The other was male, roughened by breath, speaking quickly and then stopping mid-sentence as if he had seen someone approaching. By the time Ava stepped back out with the refill bottle, the corridor was empty. At 3:41 a.m., a call light blinked on her cart display for linen pickup adjustment near the east service entrance. She changed direction, pushing through a narrower hallway lined with utility closets and muted sconces. And the texture of the building changed around her. Less curated, more functional. She could hear the freight elevator gears, the hum of industrial refrigeration, the muted rattle of dishes being stacked 2 floors down. At the service entrance alcove, a valet in dark uniform waited beside a crate of sealed glassware. He looked barely 20, hair slicked back too neatly for that hour, rain beating on the shoulders of his jacket. When he saw Ava, he flinched almost imperceptibly, then bent to lift the crate and set it by the wall. His hands were shaking hard enough that the top glasses chimed against each other. "You need these moved?" Ava asked. He nodded, eyes fixed somewhere near her elbow instead of her face. "And gloves. I was told to give you gloves." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a sealed packet and held it out with 2 fingers. Ava took the packet. The plastic was cold and damp from his grip. "Thanks." He swallowed. His throat bobbed once, then again. "Use those for East Hall, not the other box." "The other box?" she asked. He glanced toward the corner camera, then back to the floor. "I just deliver what I'm told." The line could have been routine. It wasn't. His voice had the brittle edge of someone trying to keep instructions straight under pressure. Ava slid the gloves into her cart and studied him for another second. Rainwater dripped from his cuff to the tile in small dark dots. "Are you hurt?" she asked quietly. "Your hand?" "I'm fine." Too fast. He stepped back toward the service door, shoulders hunched as if bracing for impact from a direction she couldn't see. "Just cold." Ava looked past him. The East Private Corridor branch should have had intermittent movement at that hour. Night porter check, assistant carrying files, someone from kitchen crossing with coffee service, especially with a private event still running below. Instead, that stretch of hall sat unnaturally still. Gold sconces burning over polished floor, no voices, no door clicks, no rhythm of work. From beneath the quiet came something else. A single soft thud, then silence. The valet heard it too. His head snapped toward the corridor, and color drained from his face so quickly it looked like a light switching off. He took one half step toward Ava as if to say something, then stopped himself. "You should stay on your list," he whispered. Ava's skin prickled along her neck. "What happened down there?" "Nothing," he said. But the word broke in the middle. He forced his mouth into a shape that might pass for neutral and reached for the service handle. "Don't go to the end door." Before she could answer, the handle jerked from the other side and the door opened inward. A security officer she recognized from lobby rotation filled the frame, rein on his shoulders, earpiece wire glinting against his collar. "Why are you still here?" he asked the valet, not looking at Ava. "Deliveries," the valet said. "Done now." The officer's gaze shifted to Ava, then to her cart, then to the glove packet in her hand. His expression remained blank, but his stance blocked most of the doorway. "Ms. Lee," he said, "return to assigned areas." "I am in assigned areas," Ava said before she could stop herself. A pause stretched between them. Not long, long enough. "Then continue," he said. By 3:48 a.m., she was back in the East Corridor, cloth in one hand, new gloves snapped tight against her wrists, trying to scrub a fingerprint smudge from a brass sconce she had already cleaned 10 minutes earlier, because routine felt safer than choosing. Her pulse sat too high, each beat a hard tap under her ribs. At the far end of the corridor, the carved double doors to the private study wing remained closed. She had worked this floor long enough to know they were usually left ajar during active hosting so runners could pass through with decanters and documents without triggering repeated security scans. Tonight they were shut, lock panel dark. Behind her, party noise from below rose for a moment. Laughter, glass, a swell of strings from a live quartet. Then cut out as if someone had closed a valve. The silence that followed pressed against her ears. Ava set the cloth down and listened. Nothing. Then, faintly, the click of a latch from somewhere behind the doors, not opening, locking. Her throat tightened. She turned toward Pantry Station C, meaning to call Nadine and confirm corridor status. But as she reached for her cart handle, she saw a wet shoe print on the marble near the study threshold, half hidden in shadow, where no one should have walked in from rain. Beside it, another mark dragged a few inches, as if the sole had slipped and corrected. She stared at the print, and somewhere down the hall, a man began to run. The sound came again, hard soles striking marble in uneven bursts. Then a shoulder hit the wall at the corner, and a man lurched into view with one hand clamped to his side, his white dress shirt soaked dark from ribs to belt. He wore a black vest with a silver name badge turned backward by the force of his movement. and for half a second, Ava only registered details. Expensive fabric, loosened tie, face gone gray, eyes wild with the stunned disbelief of someone who had expected protection and found none. He made it 3 steps toward her cart, reached for the edge as if it were a railing, and folded to his knees. Ava dropped beside him, catching his weight before his forehead hit stone. "Stay with me," she said, voice low and automatic, the words pulled from years of hospital waiting rooms and nights at her mother's bedside. "Look at me. Keep breathing." His chest hitched. "Don't let him close it," he rasped. "Close what?" "The door." At the far end of the corridor, one of the carved study doors drifted inward on a soft hydraulic hinge. Not slammed, guided, controlled. Ava rose fast, one palm still bracing the man's shoulder, and stared through the narrowing gap into a room of dark wood shelves, toppled glass, and a white leather chair lying on its side. A decanter had shattered near the desk, amber liquid bleeding into a fan of crystal shards. Across the threshold, bright against polished marble, a long smear of blood caught the sconce light and seemed almost unreal, like paint left by a careless decorator in a house where carelessness did not exist. A figure stepped into the doorway just before it closed fully. Enzo Varga looked exactly as he did in charity billboards downtown. Immaculate suit, silver at his temples, smile designed to reassure donors and frighten anyone who knew what sat beneath it. He held a folded handkerchief in one hand and used it to wipe his cuff with patient precision, as if this were a spill at dinner rather than a man collapsing in the hall. His gaze moved from the injured accountant to Ava, then to her cleaning cart, and that smile thinned by a degree. "Ms. Lee," he said, "you are off route." Ava didn't answer. She reached for the man's wrist, counted the pulse against the hammering in her own ears, then shifted him carefully onto his side to keep his airway clear. The move left a streak on her new gloves. Warm, slick, real. Enzo watched the motion with detached interest. "You can leave him," he said. "Medical is already handled." "There's no medic team here," Ava shot back. He clicked his tongue, not annoyed, almost amused. "That tone won't serve you. Finish your shift and forget this room exists. You did not see anything beyond a guest who drank too much and fell." The insult landed cleanly because it wasn't loud. He didn't need to shout in order to reduce her to function. He stood over a bleeding employee and addressed the nearest cleaner as if she were mop water with a pulse. Behind Ava, footsteps approached and slowed. Nadine Roche appeared at the corridor entrance with 2 service staff and the security officer from the service door. Nadine's face stayed composed, but her eyes flicked once to the blood on the floor and then to Enzo, calculating protocol against risk in real time. "Mr. Varga," she said, formal and steady. "This wing is restricted pending." "Pending nothing," Enzo replied without looking at her. "Contain this, quietly." The injured man made a broken sound and tried to push up. Ava steadied him again, and that was when she saw it. The study lock panel had not engaged. The door remained cracked a finger width where her cart sat several yards away. If it sealed, anything inside could be reset, wiped, rewritten. Her throat tightened, then settled into a narrow line of focus that felt colder than fear. She stood, moved to her cart, and shoved it hard toward the study threshold, so the metal frame caught the door edge and held it open. The impact rang down the corridor. Enzo's smile vanished. "What are you doing?" "Making space for the medics you said were coming." Nadine took one sharp breath. The security officer stepped forward, uncertain which command outranked the other. Ava did not wait for either of them. She grabbed the silver ice bucket from her cart's lower shelf and angled it toward the doorway, so the mirrored surface captured the blood smear, the toppled chair, the position of Enzo's shoes at the threshold. Then she pulled her phone from her apron, opened camera without unlocking fully, and shot 3 rapid photos with timestamps visible on the lock screen reflection. One at full frame, one tight on the badge number clipped inside the fallen vest in the room, one on Enzo's cuff beside the handkerchief. "Delete those," Enzo said softly. Ava backed 2 steps, thumb already sliding the images into encrypted cloud upload she used for rent documents and school forms, because paper got lost and poor people were always asked to prove what they already knew. Signal was weak in the corridor. She held the phone high, watching the progress circle crawl. "Ms. Lee?" Nadine said, voice strained thin. "Put your device down." "No." Ava met her eyes. "He needs emergency care now." The pantry alarm sat 12 feet away around the corner, hidden under the stainless counter where staff badges were scanned at shift change. Silent medical alert, Roche had once explained during orientation, for cardiac episodes among guests who valued discretion over sirens. Ava moved before anyone blocked her, cutting past her cart, skidding once on wet marble, then slamming her palm beneath the counter lip until her fingers found the recessed switch. She pressed and held for 3 counts. A red pinprick light blinked once on the panel and went dark. When she turned back, Enzo was no longer in the doorway. He was halfway toward her. His expression remained polite, almost patient, and that made him more frightening than any open threat. "You were given a simple instruction," he said. "People in your position survive by understanding which moments belong to them and which do not." Ava stepped backward, spine meeting the pantry frame. "This one belongs to the man on your floor." His jaw twitched. Tiny. Telling. "You clean surfaces," he said, each word trimmed to contempt. "Do not pretend you can read the room." By 3:52 a.m., the corridor had become a held breath. Staff frozen in place, rain striking high glass somewhere beyond the walls, the injured accountant drifting in and out on the marble, while power rearranged itself around who would speak first and who would obey. Ava felt the old reflex rise, the one that said, "Go quiet, go small, survive the next minute." She hated that reflex. She used it anyway. Flattening her expression while she slid her phone into the side pocket of her cart where the zipper had broken months ago, and no one ever looked because no one imagined cleaners stored anything worth stealing. Enzo closed the distance with deliberate steps and stopped within arm's reach. "Give me your key card," he said, "now. I don't have authority to surrender credentials to guests." His smile returned at the edges. Guests. He reached for her wrist. For a fraction of a second, Ava did not move. The contact snapped through her like winter water, skin memory outrunning reason, body caught between fight and old training that had once kept bruises from getting worse. Her pulse surged so hard her vision tunneled. She heard the injured man gasp. She heard Nadine say, "Sir, this is not appropriate." Too softly to alter anything. Enzo's fingers tightened. "You are making this difficult." Then another voice cut across the corridor, low and edged with controlled rage that silenced every other sound. "Take your hand off her." Luca Pellegrini came out of the cross hall in a tailored black suit still marked by the lower level event. White pocket square, rein at one shoulder, no tie now. Collar open by one button as if he had moved fast and stopped caring who noticed. 2 security leads flanked him, and behind them a medic team in navy jackets pushed a compact trauma case on silent wheels. Luca's gaze landed on Enzo's hand at Ava's wrist and stayed there long enough for meaning to settle like iron. "Now," he repeated. Enzo released her and stepped back with practiced composure. "Luca, you're arriving mid-conversation." This is not a conversation. Luca moved to Ava first. Not the blood, not the staff, not Enzo. He placed himself between her and the corridor's center with one controlled shift of his body and spoke without taking his eyes off Enzo. Security. Lock south elevator. Lock west stairs. No one leaves this floor without my clearance. He glanced once toward Nadine. Preserve this scene. Suspend all cleanup. Full camera pull from 3:30 onward. Yes, sir, Nadine said, already moving. Tablet up, voice returning to protocol now that command had a single source. The medics dropped beside the injured accountant. One cut away fabric at the wound margin, while the other started oxygen and spoke in short, calm instructions. No panic, no wasted motion. Ava pressed her back to the pantry frame and watched her own hands tremble inside stained gloves. Luca turned to her fully then, and the fury in his face narrowed into focus. Ava, are you hurt? She opened her mouth, found no air, tried again. My wrist, I'm okay. She looked toward the study. There's blood inside too, and a chair overturned. I blocked the door. I saw. His voice dropped, still firm. You did exactly right. Enzo gave a light, disbelieving laugh. You are taking the cleaner's word over mine? Luca did not even glance at him. I'm taking evidence. He held out his hand to Ava. Phone. She hesitated only long enough to confirm he meant access, not surrender. Then she pulled the device from the broken zipper pocket and placed it in his palm. 3 images uploaded, she said. Time-stamped. Reflection shows doorway and his cuff. Medical alarm triggered at 3:51. Luca nodded once, handed the phone to his security chief without looking away from Ava. Duplicate and secure. Chain of custody starts now. Enzo's politeness cracked. You're overreaching. Luca faced him at last. You assaulted an employee in my residence. A man is bleeding on my floor. The only thing over is your access. The corridor lights seemed harsher suddenly, every reflective surface turning witness. Staff who usually moved like invisible machinery stood in clear lines with nowhere to hide their reactions. The young valet from the service entrance had reappeared at the far corner, rain still darkening his shoulders, eyes fixed on the medics with open relief that looked almost like grief. Mr. Pellegrini, Nadine said from 3 paces back. Dispatch confirms external medical transport en route under private code. Estimated 4 minutes. Good, Luca said. And legal. Called. Counsel is joining by secure link. Ava shifted her weight and pain flashed through her wrist where Enzo had gripped. Luca saw it, stepped closer, and softened his tone by a degree that only she seemed to hear. Look at me. She did. Stay behind me, he said. No statements until my counsel and independent counsel for you are present. Do you understand me? The words should have sounded like control. Instead, they sounded like structure. A bridge dropped over chaos, wide enough for her to cross without owing anyone her silence. She swallowed and nodded. Yes. Good. He tilted his head toward the medic standing nearest. Check her wrist and vitals now. The medic guided Ava to a chair pulled from the pantry, wrapped a cuff around her arm, then palpated the bruising with careful fingers while calling out numbers. Elevated pulse. Mild shock response. No fracture signs. Luca listened to every figure as if they were terms in a contract he intended to enforce. Across the hall, Enzo adjusted his cuff again with bare fingers this time, the gesture less precise than before. You think this spectacle protects her? He said to Luca. It protects no one. Luca's answer came flat and final. It protects this house from you. Before coming upstairs, Luca had already alerted federal financial crimes contacts tied to the active Varga investigation and had them staged at lower security for immediate deployment. Their fast arrival was not luck. It was a contingency he had set in motion earlier in the night. Sirens did not pierce the building. Discretion protocols muted everything to coded radio bursts and controlled elevators. Yet 4 minutes later, 2 additional officers in federal financial crimes jackets stepped onto the floor with credentials displayed, faces hard from long familiarity with polished predators. One accepted a tablet from Nadine, reviewed the alarm log and camera freeze frames, then approached Enzo with formal language that carried no room for negotiation. Ava sat with a thermal blanket around her shoulders, wrist wrapped, lungs finally working in full breaths again. As the adrenaline receded, the numbers came back with punishing clarity. Rent 6 days late, utilities on warning, clinic debt, Evan's school fees hanging by a thread if she lost even one shift. She watched Enzo listen, smile once, then fail to hold it when the officer asked for his hands. Security sealed evidence bags. Medics wheeled the accountant toward the service lift, alive, monitored, still breathing. Luca stood one step in front of Ava until the corridor emptied to essential personnel and the marble floor, stained minutes earlier by violence and denial, became a documented scene instead of a secret. Only then did he glance down at her with that same controlled intensity and say, "You are under my protection now, and on this floor that means no one touches you again." Ava's breath caught on the word protection, not because she doubted Luca had the power to enforce it, but because power had always arrived in her life with a bill attached. She sat very still in the pantry chair, thermal blanket tucked around her shoulders, while staff moved in coordinated lines around the corridor and the smell of antiseptic started to overtake the metallic tang in the air. Luca did not touch her again after helping the medics settle the cuff and wrap. He kept one deliberate step of distance, as if he understood that care could feel like pressure when someone had been cornered too many times. He turned to his security chief and spoke in clipped sequences that landed like locks engaging. Full sweep of east and service corridors. Bag every cloth, every glove, every shard from that threshold. Nobody re-enters the study until forensics clears it. His gaze shifted to Nadine. Guest Wing 3 is sealed and staffed. 2 female officers on interior post, one at the elevator, one at stairwell. No exceptions. Then, to the medic team leader. She stays monitored until your physician signs off. If she asks for water, food, or a call, she gets it now, not later. "Yes, sir," each of them answered, voices low and immediate. The corridor that had felt predatory minutes earlier changed shape under command. Evidence markers appeared on marble. A portable privacy screen went up near the pantry to shield Ava from passing staff and cameras. Someone brought a small heater and angled it toward her damp shoes. The practical details steadied her more than reassurance would have. People who meant to protect usually promised. Luca's people implemented. By 4:05 a.m., the rain had eased outside, but water still traced slow lines down the high windows, turning the city lights into wavering bands. Ava held a paper cup with both hands and watched steam rise while a house physician in dark scrubs checked her pupils and wrist mobility again. Mild sprain, bruising, acute stress response. The words were clinical, familiar, almost comforting in their neutrality. The physician asked if she felt dizzy, nauseated, short of breath. Ava answered in short, honest phrases because she did not have energy left for performance. When the physician stepped away to log vitals on a tablet, Luca came to the edge of the screen and waited until Ava looked up. "I need to ask one operational question before legal joins," he said. "Your brother is alone right now?" The question hit harder than anything Enzo had said. Ava's throat tightened all over again. He leaves at 6:30. I should be home before then, but with... She glanced toward the corridor where federal officers had vanished with Enzo. With this, I won't make it. What is his name? Evan. How old? 14. Luca nodded once. Give Nadine your address and his school schedule. I'll send a female protection officer and a driver to your apartment now. They'll identify themselves on video before he opens the door. He will not be moved anywhere without your spoken consent. Do you understand me? Ava stared at him, measuring the order for hidden costs, and found none in his tone except urgency. You'd do that? I already did. He angled his head toward Nadine, who was holding out a secure phone. Confirm directly with the officer lead. You stay in control of that decision. Nadine knelt beside Ava's chair for the first time all night, posture precise, but voice gentler than before. Ms. Lee, Officer Daniela Ortiz is on encrypted line. She is at your building entrance now with building camera view. You can verify. Ava took the phone with an unsteady hand. The screen showed a woman in plain black outerwear, badge clipped at her collar, standing under the buzzing hallway light outside Ava's apartment door. Beside her stood an older driver, holding a folded umbrella and a spare backpack. Daniela lifted her credential toward the camera and spoke clearly. Ms. Lee, I'm here for Evan Lee under Mr. Pellegrini's protective instruction. I won't enter unless you authorize. Ava let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Authorized. He startles when strangers knock. Say my name first, then tell him I asked you to wait while he packs his math binder and his gray hoodie. He'll test you with questions. Daniela gave a small nod. Understood. Don't rush him, Ava said, hearing her own voice shake. He pretends he's fine when he's scared. I won't rush him. The call ended, and Ava handed the phone back slowly, fingers numb with delayed adrenaline. Luca watched the exchange without interruption. You did well, he said. And it was the same tone he had used when she told him about the photos. Not soft praise, just fact. Nadine straightened with the secure phone against her chest. I've assigned guest wing 3's East Suite, she said to Ava, formal habits returning in a way that now felt respectful rather than cold. Private sitting room, separate bedroom, coded lock under your authority. You will receive your own temporary keycard, and interior cameras in that suite are disabled unless you request activation. Ava blinked at her. Disabled? Luca answered. No surveillance inside your living space. Corridor only. If anyone tells you different, they answer to me. The physician returned with a slim brace for Ava's wrist and fastened it while explaining usage. 2 tablets for pain, 1 for inflammation, food first, then rest. Luca listened to that too, then signaled to a staff member at the screen edge. Bring hot broth, bread, and tea. No caffeine, and a charger compatible with her phone. Within minutes, a tray arrived on linen with careful simplicity, not performance luxury. Broth that smelled like ginger and pepper, thick-cut bread, sliced fruit. Ava had not eaten since early afternoon, and the first spoonful made her hands shake again for a different reason. Hunger and shock had been fighting in her body for hours. Hunger finally won. She finished half the bowl before legal counsel appeared on a wall monitor in the pantry annex, a woman in a navy suit with reading glasses low on her nose. Mr. Pellegrini, Ms. Lee. I'm Renata Cho, independent counsel retained on Ms. Lee's behalf tonight, she said. My duty is to her interests alone. Miss Lee, if you want private consultation without anyone else present, I require that immediately. Luca stepped back at once. You have it. Ava looked from Renata to Luca, then to Nadine, who had already dismissed 2 staff with a hand signal. The room emptied down to essentials. Renata guided Ava through rights, statement scope, and what not to speculate on. Preserve memory. Separate observation from assumption. Do not let anyone paraphrase her language into theirs. Ava nodded through each instruction. Mind clearing as procedure replaced panic. She had lived too long in systems where poor people were treated as unreliable narrators of their own harm. Having someone mark her words as evidence rather than inconvenience felt like a structural shift she had not dared expect. When Renata finished the private segment, she invited Luca back to establish shared timeline points. He re-entered, hands visible, expression contained. "I'll give my log first," he said. "Then Miss Lee can fill gaps." He laid out his movements with minute markers from the lower-level event, the alert he received when silent medical was triggered on that floor, the camera feed he accessed en route, the call he made to Federal Financial Crimes Liaison before entering the East Corridor. No theatrics, no claims beyond what he could verify. Ava listened and realized this was not improvisation from outrage. It was a contingency lattice he had built long before tonight, anticipating exactly this type of rupture. Renata turned to Ava. "Your sequence from the first anomaly. Start where your instincts changed." Ava looked down at the brace on her wrist, then at the broth cooling on the tray. "Service entrance valet," she said. Hands shaking. Told me to use one glove packet, not another. Refused eye contact. Then the corridor was too quiet for active hosting. Doors that should have been open were closed. I heard a thud. I saw a wet shoe print where it didn't belong. She continued without embellishment, describing the injured accountant, the blood on marble, Enzo's language, the cart wedged at the door, the mirrored ice bucket, the photos, the silent alarm. Her voice stayed level until she reached the moment Enzo grabbed her wrist. Then it thinned despite her effort. Renata spoke gently. "Take your time." Ava swallowed. I froze for about 1 second, maybe less. Then I heard Mr. Pellegrini's voice. Luca's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. Renata made a note. "You maintained evidence awareness under acute threat. That matters." The phrase landed strangely in Ava's chest. Evidence awareness. She had called it survival for years. The hyper-alert scanning, the compulsion to document, the instinct to map exits in every room. Hearing it named as competence instead of damage altered something small but non-trivial inside her. Renata closed one file and opened another. "I need context for opposing counsel's likely strategy. They may attempt to frame your calm as fabrication. Have you had prior exposure to medical trauma?" The room went quiet, except for the faint hum of filtered air. Ava stared at the edge of the tray and answered, because concealment had never protected her, only delayed impact. "My mother had hemorrhagic cancer. 2 years. I changed dressings, managed bleeds, sat in emergency waiting rooms with plastic bags of medication we couldn't afford. After she died, collection notices took the apartment. I learned to stay steady because panic wastes minutes people don't have." Renata's expression softened by a degree, then returned to professional focus as she typed. "Noted?" Luca spoke for the first time in nearly 10 minutes, voice lower than before. "What clinic treated her?" Ava gave the name and watched recognition move across his face like a door unlocking. "That clinic's emergency fund is part of the charity network Varga controlled," he said. For months, my auditors flagged discrepancies. Donation inflow high, patient relief outflow thin. We were tracing shell transfers through care grants routed to holding entities. Tonight's assault is not separate from the fraud. It's the same system protecting itself. Ava looked up sharply. "You were investigating that?" Yes. Then why keep him this close? Because pulling him too early would have warned every account tied to him. Luca held her gaze. I expected financial retaliation, document shredding, witness pressure. I did not expect him to move physically on my floor tonight. That failure is mine. He said it without defensive framing, and the admission unsettled Ava more than denial would have. Powerful men in her experience did not name failure unless forced. Luca named it because accuracy, to him, seemed to be a form of control. Renata interlaced her fingers. This context strengthens motive and corroboration. Ms. Lee's evidence preserves immediate assault facts. Mr. Pellegrini's audit trail establishes broader coercive scheme. We'll separate those legally, but coordinate timing. A secure message pinged on Nadine's tablet at the doorway. She stepped in only after Luca nodded. Update, she said. Officer Ortiz has made contact. Evan verified and is with her and driver. He requested to speak with Ms. Lee once they are in transit. Ava's eyes closed briefly in relief, so sharp it almost hurt. Please. The call came through 2 minutes later. Evan's face appeared on screen from a back seat, hair still sleep-creased, hoodie zipped crooked, trying very hard to look unbothered. Hey, he said. Your friends are intense. Ava laughed once, shaky and brief. They are. You okay? Yeah. Officer Ortiz made me show my school ID and answer your trick question. What trick question? He said your favorite breakfast when you're stressed. Ava waited. Toast you forget to eat, Evan answered, and managed a small grin. I passed. Her throat closed, then eased. You passed. Daniela's voice came from the front seat, calm and practical. ETA 9 minutes to secure wing. Thank you, Ava said. After the call ended, the room felt quieter, denser with meaning than before. Luca checked his watch and addressed Renata first. I want Ms. Lee's written statement finalized before sunrise, while memory is clean. After that, she rests. No interviews without counsel present. Renata nodded. Agreed. Then Luca looked at Ava. Guest Wing 3 remains your decision point. Stay there tonight, or we move you and Evan to an external safe residence under separate name. Either way, you choose. No one will choose for you. Ava studied him in the sterile pantry light. This man in a rain-marked suit issuing terms that sounded less like possession and more like guardrails built around consent. The night had started with her counting bus fares and missed calls in the dark. Now she sat in a sealed room above the city with a lawyer on retainer, evidence secured, her brother in protected transit, and a path she had not believed existed an hour earlier. Not rescue in exchange for obedience, but structure in exchange for truth. I'll stay in Wing 3, she said at last. For tonight, until statements are done. Luca inclined his head once. Understood. Outside the pantry annex, dawn had not broken yet, but the black at the windows had begun to thin toward charcoal. And for the first time since 2:13 a.m., Ava felt the ground under her shift from endurance to strategy. Ava kept her hand on the pantry counter for 1 extra second after she said she would stay in Wing 3, grounding herself on cold steel while voices and footsteps flowed around her in controlled channels. Nadine moved first, dispatching 2 officers, confirming corridor lockdown, arranging a fresh statement room away from the East Hall. Renata closed her files and promised to meet Ava again within the hour with printed copies and plain language notes. Luca did not issue another command until everyone else had one. Then he looked at Ava and said, You walk in the center. Ortiz is almost upstairs with Evan. No detours. The route to Guest Wing 3 cut through a service gallery and a quieter residential corridor where the lighting softened from amber to warm cream. as if architecture itself wanted to pretend violence could not cross certain thresholds. Ava walked between two female officers with her brace visible against the blanket folded over her shoulders. Luca stayed half a pace ahead, dark suit still rain-marked, posture unbending. Every few meters, a guard acknowledged him with a short nod and a hand to earpiece. Nobody stared at Ava directly, but she could feel awareness tracking her, the same way she felt camera lenses without seeing them. At 4:21 a.m., they reached a matte black door with no number plate and a keypad hidden behind sliding brass. Nadine keyed in a temporary sequence, then handed Ava a new card in a plain holder. "Primary authorization is yours," she said. "You can add or remove access through this interior panel. If anyone attempts entry outside your list, alarms trigger in corridor and command office. You may lock from inside." Ava took the card and felt the tiny ridges along its edge with her thumb. Something about being handed control instead of instructions made her chest tighten harder than fear had. "Thank you." Nadine inclined her head, formal as ever, but her expression carried a quiet correction of the way she had spoken in the hall earlier. "Protocol failed you tonight. It won't again." Inside, the suite was understated in a way only very expensive places managed. Pale walls, dark oak floors, a low sofa, thick curtains partly open to a rain-streaked skyline, a kettle already warming on the sideboard. No cameras blinked from corners, no visible microphones. Ava checked anyway, crossing the room on careful feet, scanning smoke detectors, vents, and lamp bases, the way survival had trained her to do. Luca watched without comment. When she returned to the entry, he asked, "Do you want a technical sweep team to verify?" "Yes." "Done." He stepped back toward the hall, giving her line-of-sight control of the door. "Evan is 2 minutes out." She nodded, then heard herself say his name before she chose the words. "Luca." He paused. Ava held the keycard too tightly, plastic bending against her palm. "You keep saying protection. I need the exact terms, not tone, terms." He turned fully, and she caught the brief flicker in his eyes, surprise or respect, maybe both. "You have independent counsel. You keep your phone. You control who enters this suite. You can refuse any meeting not required by law, including with me. If you choose to leave this property, we arrange protected transport, no argument. If my staff violate those terms, they are removed. If I violate them, Renata reports it directly to external counsel and federal liaison." Ava studied his face while he spoke, searching for loopholes, and hated that part of her also tracked his mouth, the quiet precision of his breath, the dangerous steadiness that had split a corridor full of fear into action. Attraction sat under her ribs like a live wire, unwelcome and undeniable, braided with adrenaline and gratitude and old distrust. "And what do you call this?" she asked softly, lifting the card. "If not ownership?" His voice lowered. "A boundary I'm willing to be judged against." The answer should not have moved her, but it did. She looked away first, toward the windows where dawn still had not broken, only thinned from black to graphite over the river. The door chime sounded twice in a coded pattern. Officer Ortiz's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Lee, it's Daniela. Evan is with me." Ava opened immediately. Evan stepped inside with his backpack hanging from one shoulder and his gray hoodie half-zipped wrong, eyes sharp from too little sleep and too much understanding. He looked at Ava's wrist brace, then at Luca, then back to Ava. "You said work was fine," he said, not accusing, just plain. Ava knelt in front of him despite the ache in her knees. "I know. I was wrong." He swallowed once, then hugged her hard enough to knock the blanket loose. Ava closed her eyes and held him until his breathing slowed, Over his shoulder, she saw Luca shift his weight and turn away by a respectful fraction, giving the moment privacy without retreating from protection. Evan pulled back and wiped his face with the heel of his hand like he was irritated by his own emotion. "Officer Ortiz made me pack clean socks. She said rich places are always cold." Ortiz gave him a brief smile from the doorway. "I stand by that assessment." The line drew a small, shaky laugh out of Ava. It loosened the room just enough for oxygen to return. Within 10 minutes, food arrived for Evan, dry clothes for both of them, and a compact scanner team that swept every surface and outlet under Nadine's supervision. Ava watched each pass. No devices found. Nadine signed the sweep report and left a copy on the sideboard, paper and digital, then exited with Ortiz to coordinate corridor rotation. The suite settled into an unusual silence. Not the oppressive hush of the East Corridor, but the silence of a locked room where no one could enter without permission. Luca remained near the entry, one hand resting on the back of a chair instead of on a weapon or a phone. Evan sat at the table with toast and broth, pretending not to listen while hearing everything. Ava stayed standing. "I need another term." "Name it." "If Enzo's lawyers come after me, I don't want your team speaking for me without Renata." "They won't. I want copies of every log tied to tonight with timestamps intact." "You'll have them." "I want my job status in writing. I can't lose income while this turns into hearings." He gave a short nod. "You won't lose it. We'll formalize temporary paid leave through the cleaning contractor by morning, then transition options after council review." Ava stared at him. "Transition options? You are already doing compliance work under pressure better than half my internal staff." His gaze held hers. "You saw anomalies, preserved evidence, and forced a chain of response. That's not janitorial labor. That's operational judgment." Heat rose in her throat for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Being seen was its own destabilization. She had lived for years in systems that noticed her only when she crossed invisible lines. Now this man with room-silencing authority was naming her competence as if it had always been obvious. Evan looked up from his plate. "Does this mean she won't have to take 2 buses at night?" Luca answered without hesitation. "That is exactly what it means, if she chooses." Ava shot Evan a look that said not now, but Luca's words had already landed. Choice, not debt, not rescue sold as gratitude. By 4:56 a.m., Renata returned with printed statements and a plan for a formal preliminary confrontation requested by federal officers before sunrise, while memory and physical evidence were still synchronized. The location would be the smaller boardroom off the executive level. Cameras active, counsel present, officers on both doors. Enzo had invoked his right to respond to immediate allegations and had asked specifically whether the cleaner would repeat her claims in his presence. The message had been delivered with polished courtesy. The threat under it was not subtle. Ava felt fear move through her in a clean, cold line. She also felt anger, old and bright, rising to meet it. "I'll go," she said. Renata looked to Luca, then back to Ava. "He will test your language. He'll try to make you narrate from emotion instead of fact." "I can do fact." Luca's jaw flexed. "You don't owe him your presence." Ava met his eyes. "I owe myself mine." For one beat, the room held only the kettle's soft click and Evan's spoon tapping the bowl. Then Luca inclined his head. "Then we do it on your terms." Evan stood so quickly his chair legs scraped wood. "I'm not staying alone." Ortiz, back at the door, answered before Ava could. "You won't. I'll be with you the whole time, and Ms. Roche too if you want." Evan looked at Ava. She nodded. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open for anyone but Daniela or Nadine." I know, he said, trying for bravery and nearly pulling it off. The boardroom smelled faintly of coffee and polished walnut, with morning still trapped outside in rain-heavy dark. A long table cut the room in half. Federal officers stood at either end, jackets zipped, expressions unreadable. Renata took the seat at Ava's right. Luca stood behind her left shoulder for a moment, then moved to the opposite side of the table when Renata requested clear witness lines. He complied without argument. Enzo sat already waiting, cuffs removed for counsel access, but wrists marked faintly from restraints. Suit jacket changed, smile restored. He looked like a donor preparing for a foundation photograph. His attorney arranged papers with deliberate calm. "Ms. Lee?" Enzo said, voice smooth as glass. "I'm relieved to see you're comfortable. Last night was chaotic. People can misinterpret." "Do not address my client directly," Renata said. Enzo's smile widened a fraction. "Of course." A federal investigator activated the recording system. Statement session begins 5:12. Allegations include assault, coercion, and fraud-linked obstruction. Ms. Lee, you may proceed. Ava placed her phone, now in an evidence sleeve, on the table where every camera could see it. Her hands were steady. At 0351, I documented the study threshold and adjacent corridor. 3 images, time-stamped, uploaded before device transfer. I triggered silent medical alert from pantry station C. Alarm log confirms. Renata slid printed enlargements forward. The first showed the blood smear and toppled chair. The second captured Enzo's cuff and handkerchief in the doorway reflection. The third showed the reversed badge of the injured accountant, with corridor clock digits visible in mirrored steel. Enzo did not look at the photos immediately. He looked at Ava. "You staged angles with a service bucket and call that evidence?" Luca spoke before Renata needed to. "Internal camera 52 East 3 corroborates her position, your proximity, and your contact with her wrist at 035214. Lock logs confirm attempted study seal while medical distress was present." The investigator added, "Alarm received at 035109. Medic dispatch at 35131. Victim transported alive. Your statement of medical already handled predates dispatch." For the first time, Enzo's expression slipped. Just a crack, quickly repaired. "Inferences." Ava leaned forward, fear still there, attraction still there, both crowded out by clarity. "No, sequence." She turned a page and placed a copy of the service corridor note on the table. Valet instruction about glove packet differentiation, potential contamination control, request lab test on both packet lots and corridor waste bins. The investigator nodded to an assistant. Added. Enzo's attorney interjected with practiced disdain. "Speculation from a cleaner outside her training." Ava held his gaze. "Then rely on your own systems. Test the packets. Pull the logs. Review the camera you thought I wouldn't notice." Silence stretched across the table, heavy and exacting. Luca's voice broke it, low and barely contained. "She is under my protection, and under federal witness protocol now. Any contact outside counsel channels is a violation. Any pressure on her family is treated as retaliation." Enzo turned toward him at last, politeness gone thin. "You're declaring ownership in front of officers?" Luca's eyes went flat. "I'm declaring a line. You do not cross it." Ava felt the sentence land in her bones, dangerous and protective at once, and chose her own line before either man could define it for her. "My safety is not his possession," she said, clear enough for every recorder. "It is my condition for cooperation. Put that in the transcript." The investigator nodded. entered verbatim. Enzo's smile failed completely then. He looked suddenly older, less like a patron saint of polished charity and more like what he had always been. A man who mistook silence for consent until someone documented him in real time. Federal officers stepped closer at a quiet signal. Asset freeze paperwork arrived by courier and was laid beside him. His attorney read the first page, then the second, and stopped arguing. By 5:39 a.m., the session closed with signatures, evidence intake receipts, and formal notice of restricted contact. Enzo was escorted out through the secured south corridor without spectacle. Ava remained seated until the door shut behind him. Her pulse beat hard in her throat, but her hand stayed still on the table. Renata squeezed her shoulder once. "You just drew the map for this case." Luca waited until Renata and the officers had finished final instructions before stepping into Ava's line of sight. "You set the terms," he said quietly. "I'll enforce them." Ava rose, wrist aching, body exhausted, mind sharper than it had been in months. "Then start with one more," she said. "No one calls me the cleaner in this building again." His answer came immediate and absolute. "Done. Done." The word still hung between them when Ava felt her knees threaten to give, not from fear this time, but from the brutal drop after holding herself rigid for hours. Renata gathered the final transcript copy and slid it into a hard folder marked with case numbers. One federal investigator stepped back in, placed a printed chain of custody sheet on the table, and spoke to Ava directly. "Your phone remains in evidence imaging until 8 o'clock, he said. "You'll receive it back with a forensic duplicate. The 3 photos, cloud upload hash, pantry alarm log, corridor footage, and the mirrored ice bucket are all logged. 2 glove packets recovered from service stock, both sealed for lab. Used cloths, broken glass, and hallway waste bins were collected and tagged. Nothing from that floor is being discarded." Ava signed where he indicated, each stroke slow with fatigue. "And the study lock data?" "Pulled and preserved. The attempted seal at 3:50:58 is now part of the formal record." She nodded once. Records mattered. Tonight, records had chosen her side. When she stepped back into guest wing 3, the suite smelled like tea and clean cotton. Evan was asleep on the sofa with his hoodie bunched under his cheek, one hand still curled around the edge of a workbook he had tried to open and failed to stay awake through. Officer Ortiz sat by the door with a tablet on her lap, posture alert but gentle. Nadine stood at the sideboard with 2 envelopes and looked up as Ava entered. "First envelope is your temporary access profile," Nadine said, holding it out. "Second is documented outcomes from your pending calls. Landlord acknowledged lease safety termination request. Utilities placed hold until transfer. And your brother's school fee ledger has been paid in full through the Victim Emergency Fund tied to tonight's federal filing. No personal debt to this house." Ava took the envelopes but did not open them yet. Her throat tightened at the phrase "paid in full." Nadine continued, voice steady. "Mrs. Corcoran asked for confirmation before she updated his athletic status. She's waiting on secure line if you want to speak now." Ava looked at Evan, then back at Nadine. "Now?" The call connected on speaker at low volume. Mrs. Corcoran sounded tired and kind, the way she had on voicemail, but now relief threaded through her professionalism. "Ms. Lee, we've received certified payment and transfer authorization. Evan's activity suspension is lifted. He remains eligible for Saturday." Ava closed her eyes for one breath. "Thank you for holding his place." "We wanted to," Mrs. Corcoran said. A small pause followed. "I'm glad you called." After the line ended, Luca appeared at the open door, jacket removed, white shirt sleeves rolled once. He stayed on the threshold, waiting until Ava gave a short nod before entering. "Federal update," he said. "Enzo is in central custody. Asset freezes are active on his personal and linked charity accounts. Bail was denied at first appearance due witness interference risk." Ava let out a quiet breath. So he can't call staff and start rearranging people. He can call counsel only, monitored under order. Luca's gaze flicked to Evan, sleeping. His voice lowered. "He doesn't get your number. He doesn't get your address. He doesn't get access to anyone in this suite." Nadine handed Luca a tablet. One remaining thread: the valet. Ava felt that old prickle return and took the tablet when Luca passed it to her. A recorded statement played. The young valet sat under neutral lighting, hands clasped hard enough to blanch his knuckles. "My name is Noah Reyes," he said into the camera. "At 3:39, I was told by Security Officer Mallory to deliver a specific glove packet to Ms. Lee and not the utility box. I asked why. He said, 'Do your job.' I heard Mr. Danner in the private hall arguing with Mr. Varga. Danner said, 'I'm not signing that transfer.' Then there was a crash. I told Ms. Roach in the service corridor something was wrong. But I stopped when I saw Mallory because he reports directly to Varga on event nights." The video ended. Nadine spoke without inflection. "Officer Mallory has been removed, interviewed, and referred for obstruction. Mr. Danner is in surgery recovery and has given preliminary corroboration. He is expected to live." Ava stared at the dark tablet screen, then looked up. "The rough voice I heard with you in the pantry corridor was Noah trying to tell you." Nadine inclined her head. "Yes, he was interrupted. That failure is noted in my own report." Luca looked at Ava. "Noah requested reassignment away from this property. Approved. Protected housing for 30 days while testimony is secured." "Good," she said, and meant it. At 8:07 a.m., as pale rainlight finally reached the window glass, the federal imaging tech returned Ava's phone in a sealed pouch along with a verification sheet. She checked the cloud hash, the copied files, and the timestamp metadata exactly as Renata had taught her overnight. Everything matched. Nothing had vanished into bureaucratic fog. She set the phone down and flexed her wrist brace. Ortiz rose to rotate shift. "I'm due downstairs. Officer Bell is taking first day watch." "Thank you for getting Evan," Ava said. Ortiz gave a brief smile. "He asked if all bodyguards drink this much bad coffee. I told him yes, it's mandatory." When the suite quieted again, Luca stood near the windows, city spread below in wet gray blocks. He did not turn when he spoke. "There's one more call you should hear." He tapped speaker on his phone and set it on the table between them. A hospital line clicked through, then a weak male voice came on, breathy but clear. "Ms. Lee, this is Adrian Danner." Ava sat down slowly. "I'm here." "I have a daughter," he said after a pause. "The blue drawing on the pantry corkboard. I put it there because it reminded me to go home before midnight, at least once a week." His voice shook once, then steadied. "You kept me alive long enough to get there again. Thank you." Ava looked at the grain of the table while her eyes burned. "You don't owe me thanks. Just testify." A quiet, tired laugh came through the speaker. "I intend to." After the call ended, silence settled, softer now. Evan woke, blinked at the light, and sat up with confusion crossing into memory. "What time is it?" "After 8, Ava said. "You can sleep more." He rubbed his face and looked at Luca. "Are we homeless?" The bluntness made Ava flinch, but Luca answered as if discussing weather protocols. "No. You're relocated under protective status." Your mother decides where next, after council review. Evan nodded, as if filing a practical fact. Can I still do school? You're enrolled, Ava said, opening the first envelope and showing him the printed confirmation with his name and start date at the secure campus partner. Same grade, transportation included. He read it twice, lips moving. You fixed it. We fixed it, she said, and glanced once at Luca. By Monday morning, rain had cleared, and the sky over the river was a hard winter blue when Ava walked into the executive operations room in a charcoal suit borrowed from house stores and hemmed overnight. Not costume, uniform. Renata sat beside her with a red pen and a stack of clauses. Luca stood across the table, expression unreadable, until Ava pointed to paragraph 7. Independent reporting channel stays, she said. If compliance flags include your office, I report externally without retaliation. It stays, Luca said. Clause 9, no forced social appearances. Agreed. Clause 12, Evan's schooling and housing stipend are compensation, not personal gift. Compensation, he repeated. She signed last, hand steady. The contract title read, Operations Compliance Lead. Under it, start date. Immediate. Nadine entered then with 2 key cards on a black tray. One for your office, Ms. Lee, one for the East Corridor Archive. Your authorization outranks event security on evidence holds. Ava took both cards, the weight almost nothing and everything. Thank you. Nadine hesitated, then added, for the record, the boundary marker stanchion removed from private hall was traced to Enzo's direct instruction at 0311. It is now logged as deliberate protocol manipulation. You were corrected publicly for a setup. That note is in your personnel file. Ava met her eyes. I appreciate the correction. When the paperwork ended, Luca walked her to the corridor outside operations and stopped at the same respectful distance he had kept since the pantry. I meant what I said in there, he said. You choose proximity. You choose pace. Ava held his gaze. Then my choice is this. We keep the line clear. Work first, trust built-in actions, not declarations. A faint, almost disbelieving warmth touched his expression. That's the only kind I know how to keep. She considered him for a long second, then extended her hand. Not surrender. Agreement. He looked at it, then at her face, and took it carefully, once. No pressure beyond what she offered. That evening, Ava stood on the penthouse balcony with Evan beside her in a new school jacket. City lights rising one by one across the river. Inside, the marble still shone. But now she knew exactly what had been cleaned, what had been preserved, and what had been rewritten in the open. Enzo was in custody, awaiting trial. The evidence was logged, tested, and locked. The calls had been answered. The warnings had names. The silence had records. Evan leaned on the railing and bumped her shoulder lightly. Do we stay? Ava looked through the glass at the operations desk, where her key card lay next to tomorrow's compliance agenda, then over at Luca, speaking quietly with security in the hall, watchful without intruding. Safety was not permanent. Neither was fear. What mattered was who honored the terms when the night turned sharp. We stay, she said, voice calm and certain. Because this time, we're not surviving in the dark.